Hello, welcome to this video. This time I'm going to talk about holons, how parts become wholes and how these wholes become parts within even larger wholes and how this pattern continues throughout reality. It can be quite important to understand this because we train ourselves to become holistic thinkers when we learn to see how everything is interrelated. The easiest way to explain this principle is taking a look at our own biology, and we'll start with the atom. The atom is a complete whole by itself, but then we take many atoms together and we create a molecule. So we create a larger whole and the atom become a part within the whole. Then we have many molecules together and we create an organelle, an even larger whole. And this continues with the cell, with tissue, organ, and eventually we have an organism. What we can see here is that the simple functions of the consciousness of the atom or the molecule will eventually create a quite complex function of the organism, of the human body-mind system. Many people think that we humans are sort of the end of evolution, that we have everything figured out. But I would argue that we are a small part within even larger wholes, where we might be a small molecule or a cell in a much larger consciousness, a much larger whole that is much more complex, much more advanced and more integrated than we are. And in this larger consciousness, we are contributing with some very rudimentary function within this much more complex being. And if we continue with this pattern, we add to this concept, we can see how there are many hierarchies above ourselves. And if we follow these hierarchies, eventually we'll move into the all-knowing source. So all-knowing source is the whole where all of reality is its body, so to speak. Another way we can talk about this principle of parts within wholes is using this figure here, where we can see how the small purple circle is a whole by itself. These purple circles are parts within a larger whole, which are the red circle. And the red circles are parts of a larger whole. The green circles are parts of an even larger whole, the orange circle, and so on. And if we can describe this in a way that are closer to our own experience, we can see how the purple circle can be represented by the individual. And these individuals can start to group together into a family, and we have the red circle. Then a couple of families start to cooperate and they form a tribe. Then we have the green circle. Then a couple of tribes start to work together and they form a larger community, and we have the orange circle. What's important to understand here is that the health, the balance, and the evolution of a system is determined by the health, balance, and evolution by its parts, and vice versa. So the health goes both bottom up and top down. And this is how it works in our own consciousness and in society at large. If we take the example of the community, if some of the individuals, some of the parts start to go against the community, if they start to run amok, they start to steal perhaps, well, the whole community will suffer as a result. This is the bottom-up creation of health. This also works top-down. So if the principles, the rules, the regulations, and the guidelines for the communities, if these are unhealthy, if these somehow suppress the evolution of the individuals will not grow, the individuals will not evolve, so the whole structure will be impacted in a negative way. The whole community will not grow as a result if the individuals do not grow. This principle can also be applied within ourselves if we can see the different parts and the different wholes within our own consciousness system. So if we look at this figure here, here is the experience of our human organism. And this whole, this human organism, is a product of different parts. So it's a product of the consciousness of the sort of material building blocks. And above ourselves, we are part of a larger whole. And if we look at our own guidance system, our own intuition, we can see how this larger consciousness that we are a part of, this larger consciousness gives us feedback. This larger consciousness guides us so we can become as balanced and evolve as much as possible. If we grow, if we evolve as a part of a larger system, the whole system will grow as a result, because the health of the whole system will be determined by the health of its parts. So we are always pulled from what we can say our future. We are always pulled from our own greater self. This is one way that we can explain our own guidance system. This is the same way that the larger community guides the individuals. So if the larger community wants to grow, it needs to guide the individuals so they can grow, and the whole structure will grow as a result. We can also look at another aspect of our own guidance system, and this is if we look at our own parts within ourselves. So if we see the human body-mind as a whole within itself, it's a product of smaller parts, the sort of material consciousness that makes up ourselves. If we, as a governing structure, as the consciousness of the organism, if we do not guide the parts, the cells within our body, the cells within our body will start to communicate back to us and start to give us feedback. If we do not take care of ourselves, if we do not sleep, we do not exercise, we hold on to a lot of negative emotions, we are angry all the time, we are stressed, our parts, our cells will start to be unhealthy. So they will not like the environment that the greater whole creates. This is the same way in the community. If the governing system is not healthy, if it do not take care of the parts within the system, the individuals, they will start to make noise. They will start to give feedback that they are unhappy. It's the same thing within our body. The body will start to communicate with us. It can give us disease, ill health, aches, pains, lack of energy, and so on. And all of this is feedback. This is the same principle of top down and bottom up, where we get feedback both from the greater wholes and from the parts. So it's the same within our body and in society at large. This principle can also be applied when it comes to our own direct experience. And when we talk about non-dual contemplation, we want to feel a oneness with all of reality. But what splits our consciousness, where we fragment our consciousness, is when we identify with some parts of our experience and we push other aspects of our experience away. So if we take a look at what constitutes our consciousness, our experience, one way to categorize these is looking at our emotions, that is part of our consciousness, our thoughts, what we hear, smell, see, taste, touch, and what we know. And the knowing to me is just the background to experience, the basic hum of experience. But all of these are parts of our experience. All of these are content within our experience. And usually we identify with our emotions and our thoughts. This is what we take to be ourselves. But what comes in through our senses, these are somehow pushed away from us. These are somehow external to ourselves. But we can choose to realign our perspective, where we start to see how all that comes in through the senses are also parts of ourselves, are also our own consciousness. So instead of identifying just with some parts of our consciousness, we can start to see our entire structure, our whole consciousness as ourselves. Instead of just identifying with some content of our experience, the thoughts and the emotions, we start to see the whole container of our consciousness as ourselves. And all of the different parts are included within the whole container. And if we start to see ourselves as the container, we can see that what we hear are actually happening inside of ourselves. What we see are actually happening inside of ourselves, within the container of our consciousness. What we can recognize then is knowing that what we hear is inside the same space as what we think, what we see, what we know, what we smell, what we touch, and so on. All of our consciousness are happening in the same place when we see ourselves as the container of consciousness, as the whole, instead of identifying with just some part of our experience. We can see how this principle of parts within wholes are happening in many, many areas of our own reality. We can see that they are in our beliefs, that beliefs are usually a product of many, many smaller beliefs. We can see it in our layered emotions, we can see it in ecosystems, social systems, and so on. So we can have many examples of how this principle can be applied. But the examples that I've shared here will be enough for this video. I hope it inspired you to do your own contemplation, where you can see how this makes the mind more flexible, more fluent, and how we can by choice see if we want to see manyness or if we want to see oneness. And we can see how health is both determined from the very, very tiny details and determined by the very, very big picture. The skill we have in seeing both the parts and the wholes will determine how well we can maneuver our own reality, because everything is interrelated. So we cannot forget the parts and we cannot forget the wholes. I will end this video by just inviting everybody to take a look at how this plays out in your own experience, in your own reality, and see how it's just as important to look at parts and see the health of the parts as well as the health of the wholes, and see how these will determine each other, how reality is constructed top down and bottom up. And that was all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.